demonstration. So my name is Peter Hauschulz. You're here in the Zest of ZAP presentation. Thanks everyone for being here, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for OWASP and AppSec for having me. I'm working currently at Human IT in Sweden as a tester. Okay, so we'll try and zip through the who am I part. And the reason I like to go over this is to kind of illustrate the background, not just for everyone here, but for the people you may be teaching and people who may have obstacles to learning security and using ZAP or whatever tools they need to learn. So my background is not IT. I spent 5 years as a making sandwiches. I did 2 years doing, does anyone know what the top middle part is? It's really weird that it's this much higher. I actually can't point to it. The top middle one is an autopsy table. I spent 2 years doing autopsies as an autopsy technician. It's kind of forensic analysis, but on the body, not digital stuff. Librarian, I've got more certificates with brakes and rebuilds and engine rebuilds than I do technical computer certificates. I had a Nokia brick phone until the provider in the US, AT&T, sent me a text message saying they were discontinuing to use their antennas and that I needed to switch phones. So I don't always have, I haven't always been on the cutting edge, shall we say. And I also used to install Windows, actual Windows, into houses. So I want to get a sense of who everyone is in the room. How many people here are like full-time security professionals, developers, testers? So there's a few. Yeah, that's my crew right there. Okay, project managers, Scrum, Agile product owners, a little bit. Okay, great. So a good cross section. But it's good to know where people are coming from. I did this same talk at a testing conference and a developing conference earlier this year, and kind of what people bring to the table is always a little bit different. So today, what I want to talk about is kind of 1 and 2, we have opportunities always to elevate ourselves and the quality of our work and our output in the world, and that's why we're here at a conference, try and be inspired, learn new things that are practical or that maybe we could use, and to teach and improve others as well, which elevates the entire community and kind of the software and technical world that we all interact with, the whole ecosystem. So we're going to focus on the second one. So the main dilemma to solve is, as we are all here for, security posture is a bit of an issue. It's really easy to talk to companies or people in companies and people will be like, yeah, security is important. But then when it comes to what are they doing practically as far as the teams or the development cycles or the planning, what are they actually doing? They like to talk about, oh, we do security. Of course we do security. We love security. But then, when they actually have to, when push comes to shove and they have to decide between putting out a product on release schedule or putting in security, and they have to decide between the two, which one are they going to pick? So security could be said to be a kind of elephant in the room sneaking up behind us. Okay, so what are the main obstacles to, or things that we are struggling with that make this an issue? And I think there's kind of 4 big categories, and that's people, there's the knowledge, there's resources, and then time. Time is a huge one for everyone. And so today we're going to be focusing on the knowledge and kind of the resources, the middle one and the left one. So unfortunately, when you walk out of this class or this talk, you won't have more time. You won't have 60 hours in your work week. Well, hopefully not. And you won't have more people in your team. But maybe with enough knowledge, you can kind of convert people in other teams, and then maybe they will become part of your team. So how are we going to do that? Well, by learning, and learning is kind of the mental equivalent of lifting a keg full of concrete over your head. And this is something I think it's important for us to remember, that learning is work, and we have to treat it kind of with that level of respect, but also in our students as well, that they are working hard. Okay, so how do we get security into the dev pipeline? Because that's really what we're trying to do. And we've got our Ninja there, and we've got our cool Agile loop, and we've got our Infinity DevOps thing, and we've got our little crusty old waterfall. Where does security fit in there? Like we were talking about, companies love talking about doing security, but when it comes to actually putting it somewhere, where do they put it? And usually it's tacked on at the end. And unfortunately with testing, that's usually the case as well. So hopefully we can solve that. So why is that? Like I mentioned, I gave this talk two weeks ago at a testing conference in Malmo, so it was only testers there, or that was testing themed. And I had some kind of interactive questions online where they're doing a survey real time while we were doing the presentation. And I asked them 7 different questions. We won't go into all those, but these were 2 I asked them. And that's, how close are you to your security team? And what's your biggest obstacle in learning about security? Does anyone have any guesses what they think the answers were to these? Well, it's too early to blurt out stuff. That's fine. Yeah. So here's the first one. Here's the answers to the first one. It's multiple choice. So obviously the thing we really need to work on is taking people out to fancy dinners more often. But no, it's a visibility issue, and it's not only a visibility, but it's an approachability issue, which I'll get into a little bit later. But security teams are often understaffed, especially for larger companies or smaller ones, really. And so they're not visible, they're not approachable, and when people think they might need information from them, they're not sure if there is one, how to get a hold of them, what they can ask them, and that kind of thing. So what's, yes, biggest obstacle to learning security. Seems hard or scary. And I originally asked how, they don't know how to skateboard, but I was told at the last AppSec in DC that security people rollerblade, they don't skateboard, so I had to fix that for you guys. So it's hard. It's something that's not easy, and it's not, I mean, coding's hard, testing's hard, anything with technical stuff is hard, project management is hard, managing people is really hard, because there's a lot of chaos or unpredictable elements there. But somehow something is special about security hardness that prevents people from overcoming these obstacles, and that's why I think we want to acknowledge that these are here so we can try and overcome them. Because the average development team, the average testing team, security has the reputation of being this. It has the reputation of being, you know, ninjas in basements rollerblading around who can walk up to an ATM, kind of like whisper into its ear, and then a bunch of money comes out. And well, Hollywood doesn't help this. Hollywood and movies and TV shows, it doesn't help this either, where people are driving next to an airplane with like a USB connected to it. That's not actual hacking. Well, does anyone do that in their day job? Nice. Okay. So it's unapproachable from, people are afraid of it from a technical angle, and they're afraid of it on a personal angle as well, because when people tend to get really good at things, it becomes a part of like our identity, whether you identify with your job or your hobbies, and then you're like, oh, this is something I'm really good at, I'm really proud of that. But it's really easy to go a little bit too far and make that something where you're worried that if other people are good at what you're good at, then you're not as valuable anymore. And this community, and basically every community, sports, music, everything has issues with that, where people who are really good at things aren't always good at including people who aren't good at it. They're not good at teaching or bringing people into the fold. They're like, oh, you're not good at that, you know, let me handle the security stuff. That's called gatekeeping, and it's big in the extreme metal community as well, where like certain levels of bands are considered better than others. And then if you don't like those bands, you're like, oh, you listen to weenie stuff, you know, I listen to good stuff. The security has an issue with that as well, and so it's good to know or acknowledge that is an obstacle that people are running into, that's preventing them from learning, that's preventing them from contributing to a better, safer ecosystem. Or security looks like this, where you have some people showing up with some clipboards and ruin your weekend with a bunch of paperwork so it can be ISO compliant. You don't know what it is. You just know you have to document a bunch of crap that you don't want to do, and that takes away time from the cool coding you want to do. So security has to kind of fight against these reputations. You know, whether these are deserved or not, you know, it doesn't matter. We have to acknowledge they're there and help overcome those, or help other people bridge the gap to taking part in quality output. So the solution to that comes right out of the Certified Ethical Hackers Handbook, piggybacking. So what I mean by that is we already have someone in dev teams whose whole job, I hope, not always, but whose whole job is to acknowledge standards, acknowledge requirements and recommendations, and verify that those are met. whose whole job is evaluating that software is doing what it's supposed to do and not doing what it's not supposed to do. And of course, I'm referring to testers. They already have the mindset of evaluating software and evaluating functions and applications for what it should do and what it should not do. So that's how they're already approaching it. And that's the reason they're there, is developers are there to build, and you need a new perspective to come in and say, how can it break? What happens when it does break? How can I break it? How can other users break it? So here's my one slide summary of test theory. There's two basic categories of testing. If something does what you want it to do, and if it doesn't do what you don't want it to do. And that's the one that includes an infinite number of possibilities, but you want to test the major cases. So if a tester is doing a simple function, you want to test the happy flow, the expected input, integer between 1 and 50, so you want to test an input of 25, 1 and 50. And then you want to test some other ones that won't work or shouldn't work. You got your 0, 51, -1, whatever. So everyone kind of get the idea what a tester's doing here. Anyone confused? And that's totally fine if you are. It's probably my fault. I just want to make sure we're all on board. This is a new slide from my last presentation that I wanted to expand on. So that's what testers are doing. They already have that vocabulary. They're already approaching these problems with that way. And so what we want to do is help them learn, basically. The same way we all learned at some point. We're all learning now something. We're all not just something we're expert at. We're expert in one area, and we're all learning other things constantly in other areas. At least I hope so. And that's kind of through, you've got to practice. You've got to start small, with your crawl, walk, run method. You can't be mad at yourself that you're not sprinting right away. You can't be mad at yourself that I can't hack into an iPhone 10. The first day I try and pull up some hacking tools on my computer. And it's the same when you're teaching it or you're trying to encourage other people to learn. And so that's part of the learning process. And another learning thing I want to mention is analogy. I do a lot of teaching to some immigrant communities in Sweden for people who've moved there and are learning to become developers, trying to change jobs. And usually what I use in kind of learning or teaching technology stuff is heavy on metaphors and analogies, where you have people coming from restaurant backgrounds or engineering or any number of astrophysics. I think we had a lady from astrophysics. Use something people understand already and then compare it to something they don't, and that creates those bridges. So usually I describe HTTP requests when I'm trying to get people to understand front end, back end, and APIs and requests, network traffic. I'll use a restaurant metaphor because people know how restaurants work. People know what a waiter is running back and forth with an order. They know what a kitchen is. They know how that's different from the seating area. So usually you can relate, your order to that HTTP request. You can relate the kitchen to the back end, to the back stock of ingredients in the refrigerator, to a database. And by bridging those gaps, you can create awareness and knowledge where it didn't exist before with analogy. So I would encourage, if you're out there teaching security to people who don't know it yet, find something they're passionate about, whether it's sports or cooking or anything, and make those analogies. And it's a lot easier than just saying, well, look at this SQL injection. Aren't you worried about this? And then just, explain it over and over again, but it might not click. But maybe analogies it will. So solution to the learning problem or the teaching problem, OWASP ZAP, that's why we're all here. How many people use ZAP on a regular basis? How many people have used it or know what it is? Okay, okay. How many people have never used it? A few? Okay, awesome. Well, that's great too. Okay, so how does ZAP help? And kind of with the second column we were talking about with testers, ZAP tries to force web apps to do things they shouldn't do or shouldn't be able to do. This actually works in some older cars because the authentication is the key, but behind the key cylinder, it's just a thing that turns. So if you can pop the whole key cylinder out, you can just turn it with the key, screwdriver. So here's what ZAP does. Here's what security testing is, back into that tester mindset, which is why I think testers are a great place to start with this. You have the testers doing the positive test cases, some basic functional or negative test cases, and why not expand their vocabulary into the security realm, where now you've got some attempts at buffer overflow. The formatting is terrible, but that one's like some XSS locators. It doesn't take a big conceptual leap because the testers are already thinking like this. This is just new input that they get to play with that have different expectations other than just numeric verification. And that's where ZAP's great because it's got all these stored already. So as testers, I don't even have to like write all those down. I can just find the library and let it do its business. Okay, so doing the crawl, walk, run method. So learning step one, what I recommend and kind of what I did in my transition from installing Windows to more security-based software, IT type stuff, is just running ZAP with your favorite browser. Like don't even do anything with it and just let it proxy the traffic. And because the real key there is, for those who don't use it, kind of in the bottom left, and there'll be a small demo where I can show it to you as well. There's an alerts tab where it's flagging things that it's concerned about or that it wants you to look at, that there are potential vulnerabilities or things that could be vulnerabilities or issues. And what that alerts tab really is to me, that's a teacher, that's a mentor. ZAP knows things about the security world. It's a collection of a bunch of different people's knowledge and best practice. And as a new person, I don't know these things. I don't know how to ask these questions. I don't know who to ask. But here it's saying, hey, here's a cookie poisoning. I'm like, well, what's cookie poisoning? Then you look at it, you start your Googling, and you kind of start learning. Like one day at a time, a few more concepts start becoming a little more clear. Oh, this is what it's talking about. This is why that's good. This is why it's bad. So this is learning step one, I think. If you can just get dev teams just using this, not even using it passively, that alerts tab can be our teacher. Now, step two, especially for testers, you can do more than just put a browser through it. You can run your regular test suites through it. You got your SOAP UI, you got Selenium automation, Postman, Rest Assured, JMeter, any number of existing regression tests or data-driven tests or automated stuff, APIs, whatever. You can point it through ZAP. And basically what that will do is it again populates that alerts fields. But it gives me the extra benefit of those alerts and those assertions, those security assertions, and I don't have to code those. When I write a test in JMeter or anything like that, I've got to hard code every single assertion I want it to make about the status code, about the response time, about certain regexes, and that takes time, whereas ZAP is already going to leverage a few thousand assertions across all of its passive scanners. So you can add it in your test pipeline just by pointing your tools to the proxy. A little bit more on that. Since it's all open source, you can even look at all the stuff it's doing. I think here I've expanded the PII scanner that ZAP has in it. And so here it's looking for credit card numbers in response bodies. And so how many people have had projects or regularly have projects where the requirements are clearly defined and the standards are objectively complete? Okay. What? Yeah, kind of. But I mean, just, even in your daily work and stuff like that. Okay, well, good. But not many. Usually a lot of projects are really fast, or issues that we see are, oh, we want to push this out in a few days. This should work like the old one did. And that's like the only requirement we get. And so the reason I want to highlight that is product owners, product managers, stakeholders, usually when they create an issue or they want a project, they won't have the security knowledge or background to explicitly list security requirements for that issue. They just won't know that. They won't request for, HTTPS only or certain cookie handling, or, that the database should have hashed all the PII, or that it should not be leaking, security or credit card numbers. And so here ZAP is handy because it's looking for these things, and it will alert you if they're there, even if you're not looking for them, even if you were never told to explicitly look for them. So that helps me as testers because I get bigger coverage for not too much extra work. And here's the fun part. Here's the whole title of the talk is Zest scripting. So step 3, where you can actually script inside ZAP. How many people used Zest? Oh, nice. Okay, that's why we're here. Great. Okay, so it's been there for a few years, developed by Mozilla. And basically, kind of as you can see on the left, there's a scripting engine inside ZAP that's, and this is a graphical scripting engine, is Zest. So you can drag and drop stuff and right click and just create things that way. Kind of like an adult security version of Scratch. But it also supports JavaScript, Python, and stuff like that. But basically, you can run scripts inside ZAP that will either extend its functionality or create extra rules or make extra calls to APIs or to its own API and all kinds of different things. So it gives it a lot of flexibility, a lot of functionality that don't exist in other tools. And that's why we have this here. Okay. Oh, cool. All right. Oh, that's not how we want that. Okay, so how does this look? How does that look? That looks fantastic. Okay, so if you can see my mouse, we're over by the sites tree. And there's a little plus next to it. And if you hit that, you get the scripts dialog. And so there you get a list of all the different kinds of scripts that, how they've categorized them in ZAP, whether you can add extra rules that apply to only proxy messages, authentication ones, the HUD ones for front-end stuff, passive rules to create extra alerts. But I want to at least highlight today, because we could do an entire day seminar on this stuff. I want to highlight standalone, because these are the ones where you click on them and they will run once. So we got a little demo one here. Oh boy, that VGA display is really something. Okay. Okay. So here I've got kind of like the script exposed. In the middle is where you run it. There's a script console. We can, I'm used to pointing at the slide. Script console right there. And then you get your regular response stuff over there. But I want to highlight this because inside here, as you can see, I've got like a get request, a delete, head, options, post. You can essentially create tests that you would normally create in SOAP UI, in JMeter, in Postman collections. You can create them inside ZAP. You don't even need to proxy other tests through it. You can create them natively inside ZAP. So here, you can assign variables, you can make assertions on things, which is basically what my job is as a tester, is I'm constantly trying to evaluate things and testing assertions. You've got access to if, then, else statements, which you can do in a nested sort of way. You can assign variables, and I think down here we've got some loops. Oh yeah, and here, some of my later requests there, you can see there's variables in the request, so it'll take variables that you defined earlier into your request, so it can make it dynamic. So you can even pull tokens out of responses and then dynamically add them to later requests. So I use this for a lot of regression testing. And that's kind of the, here, I guess, oops, let's mess it around. So let's just, when you click run, then you get your little tab and it shows up in our little friendly area there. It looks like that's interesting. Oh, yep. And we got a little failure for a gateway issue as well. But that's the basic aspects of these scripts there. Again, there's a lot more, and so start thinking of questions on like how you'd want to use that, or what else you want to know about it. Oh my. Okay. Here's the part I'm bad at, is tabbing back into my presentation. Okay, so what's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is we saw why ZAP is useful. We saw why, we know why it is. We know what we can do with alerts, both to find security issues, but also to educate, which are two huge things that the community needs as a whole. And it's that traditional tools are separate silos. like for load testing, I'm using, JMeter. You've got API stuff in maybe JMeter, maybe it's in Postman. Usually a lot of manual testing developers and testers will do in Postman. You've got all these different tools for different things. And then you've got ZAP doing security testing. But then when it comes time to, introduce security into a pipeline, you're adding an extra tool. You're adding more maintenance. You're adding another thing people have to configure with other things. And that creates, or that runs into that resistance. So with the Zest scripting, you can actually reduce the number of tools you're using, but you can maintain that higher level of coverage while incorporating security at the same time. And of course, a big issue is, how far can you take that? What else can you do with it? And, there's, I'm not sure how many people here are using it, but there's a bunch of, Docker containers or images that have ZAP installed on them to do scans, baseline scans and stuff like that. You can run ZAP in headless mode and control it with like Python scripts because it's got a Python API. It's got a regular API where you can just throw curl requests at it from like a shell or a batch script. I use it in Jenkins in that way. You can do that either way. So you can have it fully automated. I've got that on my machine. I think when I left work yesterday, I think I've run like 900 instances of ZAP in the past 6 months that I had never touched, which was I guess probably about 1,800 test suites, I should say. Each one having 10 to 20 test cases and 5, I don't know. That's a huge number. And I even have it on my machine in such a way that I'm actually using the GUI version to do manual testing, and it'll spin up a headless version on another port, run some other tests that I never see, and then it just lets me know when it's done, and I've got a report in a bucket. So you can do anything you want with all that, and the Zest scripts are available for the automated stuff as well. Okay, we're flying. That's good. Right. We like that. Okay. So the super duper recap, kind of what we've gone over so far. I haven't gone over the manual exploratory testing and fuzz testing, but ZAP is excellent at those, which you either know already or hopefully something tell your tester about because it's way easier than Postman, I think. But we've seen with Zest scripting that we can handle stuff like regression testing and automated CI/CD stuff, both from a security angle and non-security testing. API testing, that's what I do almost exclusively right now with it. Integration testing as well with multiple APIs, other applications, and of course security testing. And perhaps most importantly, that it can be a great learning and teaching tool. So before we get towards the Q&A section, I want to kind of summarize that, that was kind of recapping the technical aspect, but the big summary is that, the obstacles we are facing kind of as a community and as technical ecosystem worldwide, they aren't just technical, they're not just vulnerabilities. It's people's resistance to being able to understand them, people's resistance to be able to deal with them. And some of that is knowledge, and some of that's willingness to learn, and some of that's willingness to teach as well. And so it's good to find avenues where we can make progress in this way. And I think ZAP is an excellent tool for that. Which is why we want to bring up the references. So I think these are ones y'all are probably already familiar with since we're at AppSec, so you know what OWASP is. I do a lot of like I said, teaching with some volunteer groups, but also in the company I work at, I would usually sit down like our dev team and do a little presentation on like basic security stuff. And I found when I asked them if they knew what ZAP was, none of them knew what that was, which is fine. They're developers back in, mostly Java developers. And I asked them if they knew what OWASP was, and I think 2 out of 10 had ever heard of it. So I think it's important to remember that, we've got this community here where everyone knows what ZAP is, everyone knows what OWASP is, everyone knows to Google that for important stuff. But there's a huge world of software engineers and related professions out there who have never heard of OWASP. So if they've never heard of it, they're not going to Google that. If they see a website that says OWASP.org, they're like, I don't know what that means, and they're gonna skip on to Stack Overflow probably to find whatever it is they're looking for. So I really recommend, keeping these not in the top of your mind necessarily, because it probably already is, but also on the top of the information you're trying to project, because they're such great resources and best practices and test guides and development guides and cheat sheets. And especially I want to emphasize the ZAP user group. The core developers are always on there answering questions, and I'm always on there trying to answer the Zest type questions so the core developers don't have to. So they can develop stuff and I can just answer the how to set up a proxy, how to set up authentication for your Ajax spider type stuff. So get on that, ask any question you want. There is no question that's too hard or too easy. If it's too hard, the developer will do it. If it's too easy, I'll take care of it. So get on there and talk to us. And of course, playgrounds. Everyone loves playgrounds, especially if you're out there teaching people to use ZAP or encouraging people to use that. They're going to want to hit that active scan button. They're going to want to hit that attack mode because that sounds cool, even if they don't know what it means. So make sure you remind people that these are real payloads with possible legal consequences depending how you're using it. I think there was a question on the forum I asked or answered the other week where someone was like, hey, I'm new to ZAP. I hit active scan on google.com and it says there's a SQL injection. I'm like, okay, cool, glad you're into it. Probably not a SQL injection. They've probably, not a default scan is going to find one that they don't know about. But also that wasn't really legal. I'm sure they didn't notice because they're huge. But, maybe use these instead. So remember, these are out there. I think we've got some good juice shop stuff from Bjorn today or tomorrow as well. And that thing's super cool. So, okay, so now let's get into questions. And I still got the demo up if people want to see more stuff about variable handling or potential cases you could want to use it. Even basic how to set up a browser proxy. Any questions you have? Anything coming to mind? What do we got? Yeah. Go.
So for one of our projects, we added ZAP into a bigger pipeline. Mm-hmm. But one thing we immediately noticed that once you start getting larger applications, it takes a really long time. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're doing development, you really want to scan every time somebody pushes new code to some development branch. So what's a good way to handle this time mitigation? Because a lot of parts of the code are already scanned, mm-hmm. 1,000 times by now. But they're still rescanned every time, and it can take up to half an hour to build code.
Right. So here you're talking about a continuous
CI/CD pipeline where we want to put in ZAP just to make sure.
And it's actually you're having it run, triggering an active scan where it's throwing payloads and stuff at it.
Well, actually, kind of funny. The slide you had with the Python code, mm-hmm. we kind of pulled it in and adapted it, used Python 3 instead of 2, and mm-hmm. built something nice of it. We do passive scan, spidering, and active scan, all 3.
Oh, okay, yeah, right, yeah. That's a tough one because that's almost more of a strategy style. Because especially if you're doing the passive spider and active every time. Now, right,
exactly. That's the question I had.
Right, yeah. It's basically a context management issue to streamline it too. I don't know of an easy way off the top of my head to at least use Zest kind of to mitigate that, but it might be, because depending how you're developing new stuff, if it's only in certain areas, if that could be tied to a passing, a limited context. And that kind of thing, and then doing a big overall scan at the end. I mean, it's a great question, and that's a very real use case. I wish I had the perfect answer for you right away.
You also problem of the difference between unit testing and integration testing.
Right. Yeah. Because then if you're developing a unit and then you're doing a big test on everything every time, it is going to be heavy, and it's I'd almost say for that. It would be on a daily basis running through the passive scans or, proxying traffic or whatever, and kind of using that as a benchmark for those small code pushes, and then maybe a weekly basis doing the bigger spider active scan type stuff. But yeah, it is kind of like a pipeline management. Okay, sure.
This one. It's hi. Thank you. And the security testing needs a lot of knowledge, and our developers don't have this one. Even if I give them ZAP, I try to minimize the amount of time that we can spend on building those security testing. So I also had a 32 hours scan, so we reduce the context, but then we set yourself. So we've already have some other tools like static application security testing, which is really reliable on some kind of the OWASP categories. And I was wondering, basically on ZAP, what should I do? Like broken access control, session management, sensitive data exposure is something that I would like to monitor with ZAP. And with Zest, what are the vulnerabilities on which I should spend some effort to script ZAP that I will only be able to assess using Zest in dynamic testing?
Could you repeat the last part of your question?
If I use some static testing that does a huge work on half of the vulnerabilities, then I want to assess only the 50 others because it will be more time consuming, difficult to industrialize in CI/CD and to put in over my own application. So teaching ZAP, scripting, controlling the testing is time consuming. So I will try to limit the scope of the URLs that I will analyze, and what kind of vulnerabilities will I look for. Will I look for AP addresses and PI for sensitive data exposure? I will not try to do some XSS scanning because I know SAST will find them with 90%, 99%. So what do you use Zest for?
Right.
What are the CVE or vulnerabilities that you're trying to look for using Zest?
Right. Well, and so your question is, what kind of vulnerabilities are we looking for using Zest? And it's kind of a mixed issue because I'm actually not looking for issues using Zest specifically, but it's more like using Zest, I can hard code specific API calls to occur repeatedly and actually run non-security tests in them, but then the passive scanners will run, on that traffic. And so as a tester, personally, here you get into like test strategy more, where I prefer to have a huge amount of information and manually process it and be like, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, because I want my situational awareness of what it's doing to be as high as possible. So in our case, since it's API testing, a lot of the vulnerabilities have to do with it could be like token stuff, or you kind of like backend type issues where like buffer issues or integer issues or calculations. Yes. Right. Yeah. I'm using it to kind of expand, like you said, the scope of the testing. But that was just with the standalone scripts where it's mostly request based. You can also use it to extend what it is alerting by creating a custom passive alerts. If you're like, oh, this is an issue for our system that doesn't exist in ZAP yet, you can create your own if regex equals then alert medium, and it'll create alerts for you. So you can do whatever you want. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Can you mix the Zest and Python, for instance, or do you just choose one of them? And when would you?
Right, good question. I think I tried mixing it and it did not mix. The question was if you can mix Zest and Python, Zest being kind of the graphical language or script format, and Python, we know what Python is. Because there is actually an action available in Zest where it says action call script, and then you can call other scripts. So you can actually have like nested scripts in if statements. But once you're inside the Zest engine, if you give it a Python one, it won't execute it. So if you were in that case, then you'd have to basically start with the Python one, at least for now. I mean, we could always make an issue request to Simon and team and say, hey, I want to mix script styles. But right now you'd have to pick one. And so, but they're very different in the sense that Python is a lot more flexible because you have, the entire language at your disposal to do anything you want. I think I have one in Python that scrapes ZAP's entire network history table and extracts all the hashes and then compares them and looks for duplicates, which is like a really specific use case that I could only do in Python. You probably could in JavaScript too, where Zest couldn't do that. But Zest, since it's a graphical like scripting format, is really easy to create really fast. Like anywhere in your network tab, you can just right-click on something and click Add to Zest script, and it's saved in a Zest script to replay later whenever you want. And so if you're trying to build stuff fast or like just regular API testing that I do, Zest is really easy to drag and drop, kind of play with things, and then you get a big list. Or if you really need to do something a little more technical, then Python's a good one. Does that answer your question? Great question, though.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for the questions here. And of course, thank you, Peter, for having this presentation.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.